Hey, what's going on, folks? I wanted to make this video about a topic that I find fascinating, and that is Mussolini's war against Freemasonry. Now, Mussolini is a very controversial figure in history, and in no way should you be interpreting this video as a defense of Mussolini or defense of fascism. This is me simply sharing some material that I find very interesting with you, and I am presenting this from his perspective. So I am going to get into a little bit of the history of what fascism is to help you kind of understand it again from the Italian perspective. Now, most people know that Mussolini is credited with having developed fascism into a legitimate political doctrine, and he's been quoted as having called fascism corporatism, and he's even said that it is a merger of the state and corporate power. Okay, now a lot of people criticize this, but I'll be honest with you. I look at this and I see the United States today. Think about big tech, think about social media, the medical industry, think about all the proven corruption we see with people like Biden, Trump, the Clintons. We're living in this system today in the United States. It's just a little less obvious to most people because we have such a large propaganda wing with our mainstream media convincing people every day that the United States is a democracy. Now, the history of fascism is very interesting because this concept does not start with Mussolini. It goes much further back to Greek history and also Roman history. You can see here that the fasces is this symbol that is a bundle of rods with an axe. And one of the very first dictators in history was actually a man named Cincinnatus, who was basically a Roman farmer who was called upon to lead his country during a time of important civil unrest. You can see this is a statue of him in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is actually named after him. And this quote says, "With one hand he returns the fasces, symbol of power, as appointed dictator of Rome. His other hand holds the plow, as he resumes the life of a citizen and farmer." Because the original concept of a dictator was not meant to be a bad thing. It was somebody temporarily taking over the powers of government to make adjustments and fix the society. Then they were supposed to return that power. So that's the kind of the history of what this fascism means and where the origin of fascism comes from. Mussolini didn't invent the word. Okay. Here's a old painting, and this is supposed to be of Cincinnatus. Again, leaving his farm, coming to help the Romans. You see the fasces in the background. And here's another political cartoon, more from around the World War II period, where you can see Mussolini holding this shield that says the revival of ancient Rome. Okay, and then you see the guy over here says revival of ancient Greece. This is kind of representing that the ideals of democracy were taking on fascism and, putting up a big fight. Now, one thing people need to kind of look into is how fascism has been seen here in the United States. A lot of people don't even know that the United States dime used to actually have a fasces on the back of it. You can see today they've kind of replaced it with these torches, and it looks very similar actually. There's an important statue of George Washington where he's standing next to a very large fasces. Then you can also see the state seal of Colorado has not only a fasces, but it has an all-seeing eye above it. I mean, that's kind of spooky there to me, folks. I don't know about you, but that's not something I like to see on a seal of a state of the United States. Now, getting into Mussolini a little bit and his conception of fascism, you need to go and look up the text that he co-authored called The Doctrine of Fascism. And this was from around 1932, and you can see one of the most important parts of this is when he says, "Fascism is therefore opposed to all individualistic abstractions based on 18th century materialism, and it is opposed to all Jacobinistic utopias and innovations." The Jacobins were a radical group of people in the French Revolution. They were the ones that were cutting off people's heads, basically. So Mussolini is saying outright that, look, we're not trying to build a utopia with fascism. Okay. He's also basically saying here that, look, he is opposed to a lot of the ideals of these revolutions that were started by Freemasons, such as in the case of the United States. A lot of our founders were Freemasons. If you look at Mexico, Father Miguel Hidalgo, who's one of the main figures of the Mexican Revolution, was a Freemason. If you look at South America, people like Simon Bolivar, he was a major Freemason. Even go to France, look at their revolution. People like Marquis de Lafayette, he's also an important Freemason. So getting into this history, right, pretty much all the Western world in recent memory has been controlled by Freemasons because they are the starters of these revolutions that overthrew a lot of the old monarchies. So Mussolini is saying outright in his doctrine of fascism that he is trying to build something different. And again, the United States, it's a nice country, but it is very idealistic. Like, think about the words, all men are created equal. What does that even mean? Okay, if my dad is a doctor and your dad is a homeless bum, how are we ever going to be equal in life? Right? These are things that the founders weren't necessarily thinking of when they wrote those words. So again, it is very idealistic, and Mussolini is trying to be more realistic and focusing on building up his nation. Now, the reason this is interesting is that Italy actually was formed very recently before Mussolini's birth. Okay, before him, it was a bunch of separate kingdoms, republics, and one of the people who helped establish it into a united Italy was Giuseppe Garibaldi, who was also a Freemason. If you check out this map here, you can see that Italy was changing from about 1848. You can see again, part of it is the Austrian Empire, the Papal State, Kingdom of Sicily, multiple small kingdoms here. Mussolini would have been born in 1883, so Italy had just become a unified country right around the time he was born. Okay, it's very recently in memory that they were a bunch of separate kingdoms. Okay, so that's something that a lot of people don't know. Now, the reason I want to focus on Freemasonry is because there's a lot of nefarious things there. A lot of conspiracies are tied to Freemasonry, and Mussolini was opposed to it basically from the beginning of his leadership. Now, one book that I think you all need to check out, this is actually called Behind the Lodge Door, and this is a book by Paul Fisher, where he gets into a lot of the history of Freemasonry, a lot of the conspiracies surrounding it. And in this book, this is where most of the sources I'm going to go over in this slideshow are from. You can see here he writes, the Italian dictator investigated Masonic lodges after he noticed many socialist deputies and government employees, quote, obeyed the orders of Freemasonry in preference to the orders of the Socialist Party. You can see a little further, it says the Masonic cult adhered to fascism at the beginning and was officially never hostile to it until Mussolini prepared legislation against secret societies. And we're going to get into why he prepared legislation against secret societies. Now, Mussolini appointed a 15-member commission. It was mostly senators and university professors. They advised suppressing the Masonic lodges because of these reasons. Italian Freemasonry was dominated by an anti-national state of mind. Again, Mussolini and his style of fascism was all about the state, building up the state, putting the state before your individuality. Masonry obliged its members to deny they are Masons and thus contributing to corrupt the character of Italians. And then Freemasonry used its hold upon the machinery of government in favor of purely private interests and ambitions. And that's something we see with Freemasons time and time again throughout history, folks. Just got to look into some sources about that. Here we can look from the New Age magazine. This is actually the official publication of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. You can see this Supreme Court justice, his name is Robert H. Jackson, who was a 32nd degree Mason. He wrote the introduction to a series of articles on Mussolini, fascism, and Freemasonry. You can see that Jackson wrote, quote, among the earliest and most savage of the many persecutions undertaken by every modern dictatorship are those directed against the Freemasons. He also stated that Masons have suffered persecution under dictators more uniformly than any other class of victim. Now, I think that's personally a bit of a stretch. There's a lot of people who have died as a result of Freemasonic conspiracies, plots, revolutions, all types of things. So I do believe he's exaggerating a little bit here, but wanted to show you again that the Freemasons and the fascists, they do have some beefs. The Italian government had findings from 1981. We're going to get into a little bit more about this in a couple slides, but this is what the government said in Italy. They said Freemasonry has penetrated into the most delicate organs of the national life, using as its lever the chief banking institutions, Its chief weapon is secrecy, which debases men's conscience, making them prone to intrigue and obliging them to submit to discipline against which they cannot rebel without breaking their vows. This forces them to maintain an internal solidarity which annuls or overcomes every other duty of loyalty or justice and ensures immunity to anyone who profits by it. The existence of Freemasonry is a phenomenon of such gravity that it seems unbelievable that the state has permitted it hitherto. So, this is what a lot of people don't understand. The reason Mussolini was targeting the Freemasons is that, again, he was building a new order because the order in the world today was established by the Freemasons. Okay. If you look at the United States, for example, all our founding fathers were Freemasons. And if you look at all the subsequent revolutions in the Western world after that, most of them were started by Freemasons. So they helped establish this new order where they overthrew a lot of the kings of old, a lot of the monarchies of old, and they built a world order of their own. So Mussolini was looking to overthrow this order and create a new one. And he was using fascism to try to get these goals met. Now, how did Mussolini know this? How do we know that he wasn't just talking out his ass? Well, the reason is that Raoul Palermi, who was the former Grand Commander of Masonry in Italy, renounced it and became friendly with Mussolini. And you can see here's a book here. It says Raoul Palermi, From Masonry to Fascism. And the Grand Commander of the Scottish Rite at the time, or pretty recently in history, he actually said, quote, of Palermi, he betrayed them both, the Grand Council and the Supreme Council, proving a traitor, was expelled from Freemasonry and later given a position under Mussolini. Here's a couple of interesting cartoons. Well, a cartoon in a book. You can see this political cartoon is actually showing Mussolini breaking the mafia. You can actually see many books have also been written about how the United States and the British collaborated with the Sicilian mafia and the American organized crime families to try to bring down Mussolini. And they helped him in many different ways. Now, the reason this is interesting is because it really says a lot about our government. If they're willing to work with international crime syndicates, who's really the bad people here? Okay. You think Mussolini is the bad guy because he invaded Ethiopia, because he was allied with Hitler. Well, what does that say about the United States if we're willing to work with murderers, racketeers, criminals, okay, just to try to get at this guy? Both sides were dirty, folks. Both sides were dirty. And the United States was willing to do whatever it took to help overthrow this guy. So I do think that it shows, again, working with the mafia is proof positive that the United States is not as clean as everybody thinks that they are. Now, one of the last things I want to touch on here to kind of show you that, yes, Mussolini was onto something and he was right about the Freemasons, you need to look into this P2 lodge. P2 is called Propaganda Due, and that is a Freemason lodge that was founded in Italy. And in 1981, again, remember that quote that I just read to you before about the Freemasons controlling all aspects of government from 1981? Well, in 1981, it was revealed that this Freemasonic lodge was actually running Italy, basically. And it included 3 cabinet ministers, 2 undersecretaries, 30 members of parliament, 70 top military officers, and a number of magistrates, civil servants, industrialists, university professors, policemen, and journalists. So this lodge included prominent Italians from all walks of life, and for all intents and purposes, they were controlling the Italian government. So Mussolini was onto something here. And if you've watched some of my videos, I mean, I show you all the time how the Freemasons are behind a lot of conspiracies in our world today. Just look at John F. Kennedy. All the symbols are there that he was assassinated by the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Hell, Abraham Zapruder, the man who actually made the film footage that is most famous from the Kennedy assassination, was a 33rd degree Freemason. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. These guys rule the world. Their symbols are all over the place, from obelisks to, the Great Seal of the United States. Just look on the back of it. You can literally spell the word Mason around the pyramid, an all-seeing eye. So their symbols are all over, folks. These guys are definitely running the world. I mean, we all know what's up. It's not really a secret for people who have studied it for more than 5 minutes. So while I don't respect fascism very much, I support constitutional republican form of government. I do have some respect for Mussolini, very simply because he was trying to root out secret societies which even John F. Kennedy was quoted as having said are inherently not compatible with free government and open societies. So, again, I think this is an interesting topic. I think people should look into this a little bit more. And I think if there was anything good that Mussolini did, this is it. So please let me know what you guys think. Drop a comment. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what you guys think. I appreciate your time. God bless.